Okie dokie. So let's take a look at the review for the graphing part because I promised you I would send this out and I know you would just love a good math video. Okay, so keep in mind that the amplitude is always the absolute value of the A value. The negative flips it over but does not impact the amplitude. So in this case, the A value is -2, but the amplitude is just 2. Here the amplitude is 1.8, and here the amplitude, even though that's negative pi, which will flip it over, is just pi. The period of the graph is whatever the normal period is. So for sine, cosine, that's going to be 2 pi over b, and that means it'll be the same for secant, cosecant, because they're just reciprocals. But if you have tangent, cotangent, that's going to be pi over b. So in this case, the first one is a cosine, and the b value is 4. So I'll be taking 2 pi over 4, and I'll have a period of, oopsies, pi halves. So that's how far it is from beginning to end. This is kind of weird how this is written, but that's the same as 1/3 x. So my b value is 1/3, but the period is 2 pi over 1/3. Dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So I actually get a period of 6 pi. And here you got to pull this out. This is the kind where you got to take that 2 out in front. And then this becomes 3 halves minus 1. This is your b value. I guess it doesn't really impact the b value, but it just helps you with the horizontal or phase shift. And since my b value is 3 halves, yeah, that's not what I meant to say. I was talking about c, so I got confused, of course. So I'm going to take 2 pi and divide by that b value of 2 and just get pi. Okay, so phase shift is that c value, and it'll go the opposite of what you think. So here the c value is -1, so it'll go 1 to the right. In this problem, there actually isn't a c value, and so that's going to have no phase shift. And here, after we moved that b value out, it's going to be 3 halves, and since it's positive, it's going to go to the left. Because if you look back at your notes from the very first day, if you leave it in there, you have to do c over b, 3 over 2. Vertical shift is easy peasy, whatever that number is after the parentheses at the end, and it does what you think. So this one's going to go 3 up, 6 down, and 1 down. So there's some questions like that that are more like matching or multiple choice based. I'm taking a little drink break there so that maybe I won't choke in one video. All right, so how am I going to do this? This is a cosine graph. My A for amplitude is 3. The B for the period is a 2. So I'm going to be taking 2 pi over that 2. So the period is going to be pi. So what I like to do is I figure out where I'm starting. Starting is based on the c value. Well, there isn't one. So I'm starting at 0. So I'm starting at 0. I'm going to add the period of pi, and I'm going to end at pi. So I'm going to make that right here. Then I need the halfway point, which is obviously half pi. And then these will be quarter marks. And this is a cosine graph, so high 0, low 0, high. And the amplitude is 3, so my high is 3 and my low is -3. And so these are things that I want to be able to see on your graph. I want to be able to tell kind of where some of those key features are. And then you come along and say, okay, I have my 1, 2, 3, 4 marks. Start, finish, half, half of each half. Then I have high, 0, low, 0, high, and we all took a vow not to zigzag, so that's it. That's one period, and that's good enough for me. All right, here I do have a negative, and I have a sign, so I have to think negative sign is going to go 0, but then low, 0, high, 0. I mean, it's going down first, so that helps me think about negative, whereas positive sign goes up first to a high, so that makes sense to me. Which doesn't mean it has to make sense to you. My A value is 2, so I'm going to have an amplitude of 2. I'll go up and down 2. There is no vertical shift, and so my midline is going to be at 0 again. The B value is 1/3, so the period is actually going to be 2 pi over 1/3, which turns into 6 pi. So this is a big, long fatty. So it starts at 0. I add the period of 6 pi, and it's going to end at 6 pi, so that's here. It doesn't have any shifting, which really makes it infinitely easier. I know the beginning, I know the end. Halfway would be 3 pi. Halfway to that is going to be like 1.5 pi. And then halfway between these is going to be 4.5 pi. And then I have my key features. My my amplitude is 2, and it goes down 2. And then I look back at what I said for my shape is that it's going to go 0, low, 0, high, 0. And then I kind of watch that concavity and curvature so that I get a good sine graph. Okay, here's where the fun begins, because it looks like I'm going to have some shifting around in this next one. And so I need to think about that first. This is going to go down 1 because of that. So I'm going to go to my graph, and I'm going to sketch in that midline where my zeros will be, 1 below. The amplitude is 3, so it's going to go 1, 2, 3 above that, and 1, 2, 3 below that. And since this was at -1, this is going to be down at -4. These are numbers that I would like to be able to see on your graph. How high does it go? How low does it go? Okay, so I took care of that shift. This one is always fun also. So this is actually the trickiest kind, and this is going to go pi fourths to the right. So I'm just going to put a little, imaginary line here. That is not an asymptote. It's just my starting line, and I'm starting at pi fourths. What I like to do, once I know that starting shift, that's what I count by. So this will be 1 pi fourths, and then I keep my same spacing. 2 pi fourths, which is a half, 3 pi fourths, 4 pi fourths, and so on. And so after that, I would be at 5 pi fourths, 6 pi fourths, and so on and so on. What's 6 pi fourths? 6 pi fourths is going to be 3 pi halves. So I'm going to stop for a second and figure out, where do I actually finish this graph? If I'm starting at pi fourths, I'm going to add to that the period of the graph. So let's think about that. That's going to be 2 pi over my b value of 2, so pi. So I need to add that period of pi down here, but I'm going to write it as 4 over 4 so that I can add them with common denominators, and it's actually going to end at pi fourths. So I am starting my graph here. I am ending my graph here. Okay. And then I count the marks in between, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4. So then the halfway is here, and half of each half is here. So I actually already know where those 5 key points are going to land. I just have to think about what they're going to be. This is a positive sine graph. So 0, high, 0, low, 0. So my 0 is at the first spot. My high, which goes 3 up from there, is at that second spot. Then I'm back to a 0, then down to a low, and then back to a 0, and I just follow that curvature for that one period of the graph. So it's just about figuring out where to start. So we have some practice with that here again. So this is going to be up to. So I'm going to go 1, 2, and I'm going to sketch that dashed line in and know that that midline is at 2. The amplitude is just 1. So I'm only going to go 1 above that, which will put me at 3, and 1 below that, which will put me at 1. The whole graph is going to take place between 1 and 3. What is the period? Well, the period is going to be 2 pi over 1/3, which flips over and becomes 6 pi. So this is going to be fat. And then this is telling me where I'm going to start. So I'm going to start pi to the left. So that's actually going to be over here. Not an asymptote, just a location. So then I think, okay, I'm starting at -pi. I'm adding a period of 6 pi. I will finish at 5 pi. And again, just like the previous one, whatever my shift was, that's what I'm counting by. So since my shift was pi, I'm counting by pi's. This would put me at 0. That same space puts me at a positive 1 pi. I keep that spacing as close as I can to the same, and I'm just counting by pi's. And I mean, you could go on forever, but I'm going to go, I'm going to go out to, 6 pi. No, I'm not. I'm actually going to go out to 5 pi because that's apparently my finish. If you hear me in class, I keep saying SPF. It's to help you remember, you know, like SPF is like sunblock, but S is your start, P is the period. That'll tell you where to finish. So if I have to think about that, I go, okay, I'm going to be starting over here and I'm going to be ending over here. How many spaces is that? Well, let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, that means the third one is the middle because I need to find the half. Now, on the left side over here, there's only 3 spaces, but you know that half of 3 is 1.5 spaces. Same thing over here. I have 3 spaces. So halfway would be 1.5. So these pink tick marks from beginning to end show the placement for my, and now that I see that it's a cosine, I know it's going to go high, 0, low, 0, high. That's where they're going to go. So over here at the start, I start high, which is up 1 above. At the next pink mark that I made, I go to 0. Then I go to a low, which is 1 below. Then I go to a 0. And then at 5 pi, which is my end, I end high again. And then I pay attention to the curvature so that it doesn't look wonky or zigzaggy. And that's what I get. Okay, so now we're moving on to like, how do I find the equation? So I like to find the D value first. I'm going to write them out in alphabetical order because that makes me happy, I guess. But then I'm going to find them in whatever order I feel like it because it's easier to find D first. And the quiz does ask you for A, B, C, D before asking for the equation. And it does say cosine, so you have to pay attention to if it tells you what to use, you can't use sine. So I'm going to find D first. And I remember that the D or midline is going to be, I can see it on this graph. It's not shown on the graph on the test though. So I'm going to practice. I take the high minus that midline. No, that's not true. That's my amplitude. What I'm going to do is take that high plus the low and divide it in half, find the average. So the highest points right here and here are at 7. The low point is at 3. And so when I divide that in half, I get the 5 that you actually can already see. That is my vertical shift. Okay, then I like to find A next because I can find the amplitude either just by looking on here or by taking that high value minus the midline value. So for me, that's a high value of 7 minus the midline value of 5. So I have an amplitude of 2. And B is related to the period. So I need to take find that period, and then I'll do 2 pi over that period to find my B value. So the period is simply how long it takes. So like one cycle of this graph is from here, high, 0, low, 0, high. So that's from here to here. So that period, if you look in your notes, it says end minus start. 7 here, 1 here, the period is 6, meaning it's taking 6 units to run the whole course. So my B value is going to be 2 pi over 6, and that's going to reduce to pi thirds in the equation. And then your shift. This is the first high. I'm supposed to do a cosine graph. That is 1 to the right. So that's going to make my C value a -1. And now you're just literally writing them together. You're going to go, okay, my function is, and then my A value is 2. It's not a flipped over version of cosine. And then cosine, and then my B value, and then my X, my C, shifting 1 to the right, and then moving it up 5. So I'm just taking my A, B, C, and D value and putting them into an equation. Okay, let's try that again. This is also a cosine graph. So A, B, C, D. D is the easiest one to find. I'm going to take my high value, which I actually can't see. What is this counting by? So I guess the high value is a 3. And then the low value appears to be a -7. And so it, is that right? 1, 2, 3, and then down to 7. Okay, so I'm going to, for D, take my high plus, that's not a -3, sorry. I'm going to take my high, why can't I write? let's try it again. Third time's a charm. High, and then add the low and divide it in half. So the average, that would be -4/2. So my D value is going to be -2, which again, you can see in this graph that they have drawn in. Okie dokie. Then I'm going to go ahead and find my A. My A value is the high minus that midline. So the high is a 3 minus -2 actually puts me at an amplitude of 5, because you go up 5 from there or down 5 from there. I'm going to do this as the first high and then this as the next. So that's one repetition. That's one time that it went high, 0, low, 0, high. And I'm doing that one because I can see the whole entire period of cosine, high, 0, low, 0, high. And so that is starting 5 to the left. And so my C value is actually going to turn out to be a +5 in the problem. And then for B, I'm going to take that 2 pi and divide it by the period. And the period is determined by the end of the cycle minus the beginning of the cycle, which was at -5. So that cycle spans 30 units. So my B will be pi over 15. So then I have my pieces. I have my A, B, C, and D, and I can just write my equation. And so I'm going to write my equation as f of x equals my A value. They told me to use cosine. My B value, my shift 5 to the left, and down 2. Uh-oh, here comes the choking. Sorry, I'm just looking at these and how similar they are or are not to what you're doing. This sort of a combo. This one is the most similar to what's going to be on the quiz, and that is just words, and you have to figure it out. But it is about a Ferris wheel. So I guess what I would do is make sure you look back at the notes example and that you really understand how we did that. And then you'll be in a good position. I'm not actually going to go through all of these on the video, only because there's not a data scatter plot on the quiz. There's not one where you're given the equation like this and asked to find the information. It's hard to be me. All right, let's find out about this rowboat. Keep in mind that the pieces of information are the same. You still have to find all the pieces of information. Rowboat is observed from a dock. It bobs up and down from a high of 3. So my high is 3. Above the dock to a low of 8 below the dock. So I would call that -8 if the dock is like your 0 line. Okay, so let's find out where that dock or midline is. It's going to be high plus low divided in half. And so then that's lovely because I get -5 halves or -2.5. Okay, so when you go to draw, I don't know if you want to draw it or not. I guess that's totally up to you. So I'm going to have a dock at, so if this is just like the x-axis, let's say, I'm going to be at -2.5 below that for a shift. And then it's going to go up 1, 2, 3. No, I'm sorry, it's going to be a high of 3. Wait, why am I so confused? My drawing is terrible. So it's going to go from a high at 3, and then it's going to go down 2, 1, 0. There's x-axis, and then it's going to go, oh shoot, down to -8. I'm just drawing this terribly. I just am wishing I wasn't doing this part of the video because it's so bad. Sorry. I didn't leave myself enough room. There we go. And we're going to be like, here is 0 because that's closer to 3 than 8. And then my dock is down here somewhere so that it's halfway. Okay. Wow. So anyway, okay, it goes to its high point every minute. So, I'm just trying to think about the quiz. The quiz talks about minutes, and you can just use that minute as your answer. Like you can use 5 minutes as a 5. So it says, let time be in minutes. and h in feet relative to the dock. Write an equation for its, okay, so it's going to basically be going high and then down towards the dock and then down to the low and then back up and then here. And so this is going to be our dock. And our dock is located at negative 2.5 as a D value. Since it starts high, we're going to be using a cosine graph. If that makes sense. And so the height in terms of time is going to be that. Once we know that this is at negative 2.5 and it goes up to 3 and it goes down to negative 8, aka not drawn to scale, you can find the space between that. Remember, we do high minus that midline. So that's actually going to turn into a 5.5 for an A value, because A is always going to be that high minus the D value. So 3 minus negative 2.5. Okay, and then this one is going to be every 1 minute. So when I'm finding the B, I'm going to take the normal period and divide it by 1 minute and actually just get 2 pi. And then here, I'm just going to get a T. I'm not going to have any horizontal shift because it started at a high. It went high, 0, low, 0, high. So you're just piecing those things together, and those are actually easier than a lot of the other stuff. And then this, you're not going to have to be able to do those. So if you use kind of this example of how to talk yourself through finding each piece, and you go back to the Ferris wheel example in the notes, you're going to be more than ready for the word problem that's on there. Hope that helped. See you soon. Bye.